Hey everybody, it is time once again for a 2021-2022 NHL season preview, and today we're going to be finishing up the California teams, looking at the San Jose Sharks and their upcoming season. Before we get into it, I just ask you to please subscribe and hit that thumbs up. Helps out so much and is greatly appreciated. But San Jose obviously has struggled a little bit for the past couple of years, and it's probably going to continue. This is a team that is headed towards a rebuild here sooner rather than later. They need it. And they're in a position right now where they're kind of in no man's land. They've got a lot of big name players signed to massive long-term contracts, but those big name players aren't really performing at the level that they were a few years ago. They're still stuck with them. And they don't really have the young up-and-coming talent or the depth to make up for that, and that's what's led to San Jose being kind of having these huge contracts and these star players on the roster, but not being a good team for the past couple of years. So it's going to take a little bit to work out of that for the Sharks, and some of it's just going to be waiting until they can get themselves out of some of these contracts that they unfortunately signed and have turned out to not be very good ones. But getting into the preview, before we look forward, we always look back. And if we look at last season, this was a team that went 21, 28, and 7 on the year, only had 49 points in a 7th place finish in the West Division, second to last in the division. And it was another very disappointing season for the San Jose Sharks as they continue to struggle here over the past couple seasons and presumably for the next few as well. They scored 2.61 goals for per game, which is not great. Obviously, definitely would like a higher goal total than that, especially when you have the guys on the roster that this team did. They still weren't able to really put the puck in the net all that much, but where they really struggled and what was ultimately the biggest thing wrong with the San Jose Sharks team last year was trying to keep the puck out of the net. They gave up 3.5 goals against last season, 3.5 goals a game. Some of that was goaltending. Martin Jones was not good. Some of that was team defense and just the overall team play and defensively not being nearly good enough. But there's plenty of blame to go around. 3.5 goals against per game is not going to cut it. That is one of the worst numbers in the NHL. Their power play was abysmal, and you don't normally, you wouldn't expect that with a team that has Burns and Carlson and Couture and Timo Meier and, Tomas Hertl and guys like that, but their power play was terrible, just 14.1% on the power play last year. Also not going to cut it, and that went along with their offensive struggles. Their penalty kill was actually pretty decent, 80.4%. Nothing to complain about there. So they can kill penalties, but other than that, their offense was very lackluster. Their overall team defense was terrible, and their power play was very bad last season. So going into this offseason, they had some moves to make, and they didn't really make anything super major. I think this is a team that knows they're kind of in no man's land and headed towards that rebuild right now. So they kind of just added in some placeholders this offseason. And subtraction-wise, their biggest move was the buyout of Martin Jones, who, as I mentioned, was very bad last season. So they bought out the rest of his contract. He signed to be the backup now in Philadelphia, and Jones is gone out of San Jose. They also traded goaltender Joseph Coronar, so he is gone now. Patrick Marleau, free agent, was not re-signed. I mean, probably not going to be, but that, I guess, door isn't completely closed yet. Ryan Donato was not tendered a qualifying offer, so he became a free agent and has since signed with Seattle. Curtis Gabriel was a free agent. He signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Kristen Yaros was traded to the New Jersey Devils. Greg Pateryn was a free agent, depth defenseman, and he signed with the Anaheim Ducks. And forward Marcus Sorensen, also a free agent. So some, minor losses there. The biggest one was Martin Jones, his buyout, obviously. Other than that, it was pretty much all depth players leaving for San Jose. On the addition side, it was pretty much a lot of placeholders. With Jones and Coronar leaving, they needed new goaltenders, so they signed James Reimer coming in from Carolina and also traded for Adin Hill from the Arizona Coyotes. So Reimer and Hill is their new goaltending tandem. We'll see how that goes. They also brought in veteran forwards Nick Bonino and Andrew Cogliano. Both of these guys are well into their 30s. And again, just kind of veteran placeholder players just to fill out the roster for San Jose. They added forward Nick Merkley. He was in the trade that sent Yaros to New Jersey. So Merkley comes in, and he'll probably play in the bottom six for the Sharks this year, or maybe even the middle six, depending on which line they slot him on. They also signed forward Lane Peterson. So some depth moves there for the Sharks to replace some of the depth that they lost. Now it is time to take a look at my projected roster for San Jose. And again, this is just a projection. There's obviously, I don't know, there's some players in here that probably wouldn't be in an NHL lineup on many other teams, but because of San Jose and their lack of depth, they're going to probably be in the NHL lineup here for this season. Obviously, up front, you've got your big players like Logan Couture, Tomas Hertl, Timo Meier, Kevin Labanc. They added in Nick Bonino and Andrew Cogliano, a couple of veteran guys. Rudolphs Balcers returns. Dylan Gambrell was re-signed. I actually like Gambrell a lot. He's going to be one of the more fun players to watch on the Sharks. They've got Alex Barabanov. Matt Nieto is still sticking around. Nick Merkley, I think, makes this team. They really don't have much forward depth, so Merkley probably is making the opening night roster. Then Lane Peterson, who they signed, and John Leonard, who's going to be kind of an extra fill-in forward for them. We'll see where he slots in this year, but that's their forward group. On the back end, obviously, they've got their big three, Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, and Mark-Edward Vlasic. The big three players on really bad contracts. They've got Radim Simic still. Mario Ferraro, also who I like a lot. Ferraro is going to be another guy to watch in San Jose. And Nikolai Nizov. He's a young Russian player, 23 years old, that played last year and is probably going to be regular in the lineup this year. For seventh defenseman, there were a couple of options for seventh D-man. I'm penciling in Jacob Middleton into that spot. He's played some NHL games and is one of those, mid-20s guy who's like a tweener between the AHL and NHL, but I think they're younger defensemen, they're prospects. They're going to want playing a regular shift. Somebody like a Ryan Merkley, they're going to want playing down in the AHL as opposed to sitting up in the press box. So I think you take a guy like Middleton, make him your seventh D, and then let the younger guys kind of play on a regular basis down in the minors. In goal, James Reimer and Adin Hill. Like I said, your goaltending tandem. That is certainly not one of the better goaltending tandems in the NHL. But like many things with this San Jose team, it's not one of the better ones in the NHL. As far as depth goes, there's not a lot of great depth options here for San Jose, and it's because of the big contracts that they've signed to star players that they've kind of handicapped them salary cap wise, and they haven't been able to really fill out the depth part of the roster, and that's one of the main reasons San Jose is in the situation that they are in. But you've got Zach Gallant and Jeffrey Viel. Both those guys are pretty tough. Viel likes to fight, so I kind of hope that he plays NHL games this year because it's kind of fun to watch. And then you've got some younger guys like Noah Gregor or Jacob McGrew who could also see NHL games. On the back end, I have Middleton penciled in as the 7th D, but Nicholas Maloch could also maybe make the team and be that 7th defenseman. If Middleton makes it, then Maloch is going to be a depth guy. Ryan Merkley, also a depth guy, but I think he would only be up on a call-up basis if they needed him, because they're going to want him playing a regular shift down in the AHL. And as far as a third goaltender goes, they don't really have much for options, but I would say Alexei Melnichuk is probably their go-to third goaltender if anything were to happen to Reimer or Hill, because their other two goaltenders that they have down in the AHL, one of them has no pro experience whatsoever and is coming out of the Quebec Major Junior League, so obviously he's going to be playing a full season or probably multiple in the AHL before he sees NHL time. And their other goaltender split last year between the ECHL and the AHL. So I would say Melnichuk is probably the closest to playing NHL games. So he, I presume, would be the third goalie. But again, this is a team that's headed towards a rebuild, kind of already in it. They haven't made the playoffs in a couple of years, and I certainly don't expect them to be anywhere near a playoff spot this year. They're locked into some really bad contracts, and that's kind of what's been a big problem for this team. They spent so much money on Vlasic and Burns and Carlson and Couture and Evander Kane. I haven't even mentioned Evander Kane. That whole situation, you didn't see him listed up there because I don't think he's playing ever again as a San Jose Shark. He may never play in the NHL again, given all of the things going on surrounding him. I certainly don't see him playing again for the San Jose Sharks. And there have been Sharks players that have made it very clear that they don't want him in the locker room and they don't want him around the team. He's not in training camp. He's not playing in the preseason. So that's why I didn't have him listed. He is technically still under contract. We'll see how much longer that lasts, depending on how these investigations turn out. But there's so many problems surrounding Evander Kane. I just don't think that they're going to want him around the team, and I don't think he's going to play this year. He may never play an NHL game again, depending on how this stuff kind of unfolds, but I certainly don't think he's going to be playing a game with the Sharks. But he's got making $7 million a year. We'll see what happens with that contract. If San Jose has grounds to terminate it, I definitely think that there's a possibility of that happening. Couture's contract isn't terrible. I mean, I like Logan Couture as a player a lot, but he's got 6 years left at $8 million. Carlson's making 11.5. Burns is making $8 million. Vlasic's making $7 million. Like, they have way too much money tied up in these big players that really aren't playing up to par and haven't been good enough for the past couple of years. And they're all getting older as well. So you've got these aging star players on really bad long-term contracts, and that's really hindered what this team's been able to do because they haven't had the money to have good depth. And now, because they were a playoff team for so long, they didn't really have that, young up-and-coming talent, that high-end up-and-coming talent infused into the roster. And all of a sudden now you've got a very mediocre hockey team that's kind of just waiting around to go into that full rebuild mode. And I think that rebuild is coming very, very quickly for the San Jose Sharks. But that's my preview for this year. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, our membership link, merch store, and donation link down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon.